What's up, everybody? I just read a Shenmue article that I was really impressed by, and I wanted to just go ahead and read it for you in this video. The article is from a website called medium.com, and it's called What We Talk About When We Talk About Shenmue. So kick back, relax, grab a Jet Cola, and have a listen.
One of the first games I ever fell in love with was Yu Suzuki and Sega AM2's Shenmue. I knew I loved it well before I even played it. I would sit for what felt like hours in my sister's dimly lit middle school bedroom and watch her run back and forth from the Hazuki estate to the streets of Dobuita, buying capsule toys, talking to cinder block-faced children, and yes, looking for sailors. I never followed the plot of the game, and it seems entirely that this memory was a one-time occurrence. I was 4 years old then, too young to understand any of the action or inaction on screen, yet I was enthralled. The route from the Hazuki's wooden gate to the apartments on the east side of Sakuragoka was burned into my mind at an early age. The greens, browns, and grays of the ivy, trees, and stone were as vivid and real as anything I'd seen on television. The game's character models, blocky and archaic by today's standards, looked human. I have no way of knowing which of my earliest gaming memories came first. My first impressions of F-Zero X, Jet Grind Radio, Shenmue, and Beetle Adventure Racing are all too closely knit for my brain to make sense of. These games exist in the ether, too insulated in the haze of early childhood for me to give a proper critical appraisal. Released from 1998 to 2000, they had already received their critical dues. I don't need to add them. Video games, despite their basis as a consumer product, are art. As the receiving audience, I don't want to examine Shenmue or any of these titles like they're supposed to be filling out a perfunctory checklist of things games should do. My sister was a gamer well before I was born and had amassed a sizable collection of games. Ever the tastemaker, she had a collection of cult classics whose wild box art, vibrant instruction manuals, and colorful cartridges and discs said more about the game than any grainy trailer footage could have. She had two Dreamcasts, a white Model 1 and an LE jet black Sega sports model she had snagged when inventories were being liquidated. The system was 7 years old by this point, but still held its place on her shelf next to her PlayStation 2 and GameCube. Even her chronically malfunctioning Xbox couldn't keep pace with Sega's machine. I would ask her to play some games for me to watch, other times to play. She adamantly refused to let me watch or play Resident Evil, no matter how often I asked. I always assumed this was a directive from our mom, but eventually figured out that this was just my sister trying to be responsible. She was protective of the Dreamcast, probably because it sounded like it was dying, so my time spent playing it was limited, though it was a distinct privilege when I had pulled Shenmue out one night, asking to play it, and she said yes. This was a big deal for me. It was a multi-disc game, my first. It was on the Dreamcast, a console so revered in my sister's room that it sat above her GameCube. My sister would reference the game casually in conversation, holding it up as one of the greatest games ever made. It was also the first game I ever revisited. I had memories of this game, not of playing it, but of watching it. Something about it struck a chord with me at 4, and I was ready, at the mature age of 9, to see if it would deliver on its promise. It did. I first played Shenmue in winter 2006. I was in 4th grade and eagerly anticipating the release of the Wii. My eyes pored over every piece of pre-release information about The Legend of Zelda, Twilight Princess, Disaster, Day of Crisis, and Super Smash Bros. Brawl. That Christmas season felt like forever. Every day spent without the hottest new toy was a day in the cultural desert. I would linger in front of the Wii games selection, staring at cases of Red Steel and Trauma Center, Second Opinion, praying that I would eventually have the opportunity to play these modern classics. I made lists of games I wanted to see on the Wii and on the Virtual Console. I was obsessed. I sent out a sweepstakes mailer from Nintendo Power so I could at least try and snag a cool t-shirt, if not the whole console. I was obsessed in a way that only a child can be. Unconcerned about finances, game quality, or third-party support, the Wii promised a path to everlasting joy. This hype, this obsession only faded when I played Shenmue. Much has been said about the immersive qualities of Shenmue. The detail put into every street corner, business storefront, name placard, and NPC is something that few developers have tried, even in 2019. With so much detail, it's almost unwieldy. Virtual tourism might be the name applied to it today, but unlike Assassin's Creed, which popularized the term, there's a distinctive emphasis placed on the small details. There are bus schedules, phone books, and multiple convenience stores where the majority of items are unpurchasable. Shenmue feels decadent and superfluous in its attention to detail. Perhaps wisely, future open-world titles would shoot for quantity over an obsessive attention to detail. However, it was this attention to detail that allowed me to lose myself in the streets of Yokosuka. Children are fascinated by the strangest things, and there are few things stranger and more wondrous to an American 9-year-old than an immaculate recreation of small-town Japan. I tried to talk to every NPC, spent thousands of yen on capsule toys, and familiarized myself with the surroundings as best I could. The Christmas decorations put up in the game coincided with the decorations being put up in my neighborhood. The cold, snowy streets looked the same in the game as they did outside my windows. The patches of land with seemingly abandoned construction equipment reminded me of vacant lots just minutes away from my house. The game even had a smell, albeit one provided by an external source, a tropical fruit medley air freshener. It is one of the only times I've considered myself immersed in a game. Immersion is a tricky topic, and not one that I find myself particularly interested in. When I play a game, I fall into trances, my muscle memory improves, I become more goal-oriented, but I'm well aware of outside pressures like time, hunger, and a rapidly deteriorating attention span. It's easy to break out of a trance, it is less easy to break out of an immersive state. Immersion requires the commingling of real life and what you're doing in the game. Trances require drives, a drive to beat, to complete, to win. Immersion is the opposite. It asks you to take in your surroundings in real life and on screen and to synchronize the two. Trances demand accomplishment. Immersion wants you to lose yourself in between the screen and the earth. Awareness of your lived-in environment is key to immersion, not neglect of your lived life as so many fervent gamers would have you think. I do not remember when I beat Shenmue exactly. My sister bought a Wii several days after Christmas came and went without one. I am unsure if I beat Shenmue before I played Wii Sports for the first time. What is noticeable is that I did beat Shenmue. I distinctly remember needing help with the final Great Chai fight and the final QTEs taking me by surprise. It was one of the first games not named Pokemon where I saw the credits. I was quick to declare it my favorite game, always being the type of person to pick something my friends had never heard of as my favorite, instead of defaulting to the new hotness. The game has since held a special place in my heart. Even as I've played hundreds of other games, Shenmue was always my childhood favorite. I replayed Shenmue in 2009 when I had my own Dreamcast. I sped through the first disc, labored through the second disc, and crushed the third disc in a matter of days. This was during an elongated period of my teenage years where I would beat games like it was a job. I would see how many games I could beat in a year, actively trying to outdo myself. Eventually, I burned out, but 2009 was before that. This playthrough, although I enjoyed it, is a blip compared to my first. I bought the same air freshener before I played it, trying to mimic my memories of 2006, and I timed it so I would play it during December like before. I walked away from the game still loving it, but more aware of its flaws than before. As much as I loved Shenmue, and as often as I would call it my favorite game of all time, I could do little to defend its shortcomings or explain to people why they should play it. As a Shenmue fan, I was vocal but unconvincing. Any arguments I had about the game likely included the words, "Yeah, it doesn't do X well, but," which I've learned is a bad way to defend your favorite game. In the years following, I restarted a Shenmue file once or twice, but never got past the first few hours. I would look for sailors, get some capsule toys, and tap out. I didn't know if I would ever revisit the first game again. And then the impossible happened. Shenmue 3. Shenmue 3's announcement was a dream come true. I was 18 in 2015 and had the money to immediately put down $60 for a PS4 copy. I expect nothing from Shenmue 3. I'm simply happy that it exists. I do not currently own a PS4 with which to play Shenmue 3 on. I do not know when I will get the chance to play it, although I do expect my copy to arrive at my mother's house where it will sit and collect dust until I come to retrieve it. Fast forward to September 2018 when I took the opportunity to buy the Shenmue HD collection for Xbox One. I bought it on launch as a way to make up for missing the original launches of Shenmue and Shenmue 2. Some part of my consumer monkey brain interpreted this as proof that I was a loyal fan, as if donating $60 to a Kickstarter wasn't proof enough. When I got home, I only installed the first game. I wouldn't get to its sequel when I finished the original. There was no rush. It had been 9 years since I last really sat down with Shenmue. In those years, I had beaten hundreds of games, played hundreds more, and practically burnt myself out on the hobby. As a somewhat socially active college student, I had significantly less time to game compared to my time spent as a socially maladjusted middle and high school student. I installed the game, popped the disc out, and put it back in its case. I would get into Shenmue over winter break, just like old times. Winter break arrived and so too did my third playthrough of Shenmue. My roommate watched me start it and offered his commentary, much of it reminiscent of the previous 20 years of online discourse. I played up to the game's idiosyncrasies for my viewing audience. Listen to this shitty voice acting. Yeah, all you do is collect capsule toys and walk around. No, you can't buy that. You can only buy cassettes and potato chips. I tried to explain why I liked the game, but again, came up short. My praises were cynical, and even with the HD upgrade, time has not been kind to the blocky polygons that previously looked so real. It looked, sounded, and played like a game from 2000. My intent wasn't to wow my friends with this time capsule, but to impart some degree of respect for it. I didn't need them to bow at the altar, but I would have done the game a disservice if I had just let them look at it like a circus sideshow. I tried to play Shenmue solo as often as I could. It was the type of game that asks you to spend time one-on-one with it. I say this not because the game's methodical pacing is poison to audience engagement, but because Shenmue is ostensibly a game about living the last carefree days of your life as a teenager. Something that had never resonated with me when I had played the game previously was how Ryo's age was deeply significant. I was younger than Ryo both times I had played the game. In a sense, I looked up to Ryo. I didn't see myself as I was in Ryo, but as what I could be. As it turns out, being an oblivious, morally pure dope is not where my temperament took me. Playing Shenmue as an adult allows me to see Ryo and his character arc from a different angle. Ryo was still a kid, young and naive, and his hobbies, video games, sparring, capsule toy collecting, all reflect that. You can engage in more adult hobbies, darts, pool, gambling, but these are significantly less enjoyable than a game of Space Harrier. You spend the first 2 discs running around your hometown looking for people and killing time. Over time, you develop a routine. You will find hobbies that you like, and you'll spend your daily allowance indulging yourself in addition to advancing the plot. My usual routine consisted of running around the downtown, talking to citizens, and learning about their interior lives. I made friends with Kurita-san, who runs the Army Surplus store, and learned about his relationship with Yuriko, who works at the flower shop. I talked to Liu Gonghui, who hung out at the park. He fell ill during December, and I only saw him sparingly from then on. I regularly visited Ono-san at his motorcycle shop and would see him drunkenly stumbling home on late nights. These interactions quickly became repetitious, but I was still taken back by the amount you could learn about the inner workings of the town just by talking to its residents. These weren't conversations you were having to activate side quests, they were conversations you were having to flesh out the world. They are ancillary, but extremely valuable in making Yokosuka seem real. When I grew tired of talking to my friends, I would follow cats around town. One cat liked to walk from Sakuragoka to the abandoned movie theater where it would chill for hours. I liked to think his owner used to live above the movie theater before it was condemned. Other times I would sit outside the arcade and buy capsule toys. When the machines failed to produce the results I wanted, I would go inside and play Space Harrier or Hang On for a bit. Afterwards, I would buy a soda in the hopes that it would provide a winning can that I could then exchange for a raffle ticket. My long-term goal was to get a copy of Space Harrier that I could play at home. I must have bought 3 dozen cans before I snagged a copy. Yet one of the most common complaints about Shenmue is that it's boring. And yes, Shenmue does drag at parts. The moment Ryo decides he wants to go to Hong Kong is where the game's momentum stalls. By this point, the player has likely sampled everything there is to do in Yokosuka. Ryo spends hours looking for ways to make money, but all you can really do is spend it. A distinct sense of malaise and hopelessness sets in. Like Ryo will be stuck in his hometown, a casualty of economic circumstance. Anyone who has been between jobs will identify with this feeling, but a 13-year-old who had never held a job did not. It is an incredible relief when Ryo gets a job at the harbor as a forklift driver. It's exhilarating to zoom around the docks delivering crates to warehouses. As you deliver more crates, your pay gets bumped. Unlike everything else in the game thus far, it provides a unique sense of accomplishment and actively rewards you for doing well. This is something that video games do as an extension of the medium, but is something that Shenmue resists doing until it's appropriate for the narrative. This unfairly derided segment upends all previous routines you established in the game. I hope you enjoyed playing arcade games and collecting capsule toys all day because your time to do so now is severely limited. It was during my time as a working man that I won that coveted copy of Space Harrier. I managed to pick it up at 10:30 p.m. on my way back after a long day at the docks. I ran home before the game would force me to go to bed and popped it in my Sega Saturn. I stayed up until 2 a.m. playing Space Harrier before a stray tree ended my run. After that, I went to bed. I never had the opportunity to sit down with Space Harrier again. It was the most richly rewarding game of Space Harrier I ever played. This is what separates Shenmue from practically every other game in my past. It provides clear demarcations between work and play. You need money, so you work to get money. The tasks you do to earn it are repetitive and soul-sucking. While I have always found driving the forklift to be enjoyable, it is non-negotiable that many players assume that the final third of this game would be more cathartic. My rewards were few. Forklift toys and Space Harrier. These trophies meant more to me than seeing the credits roll. The routine Shenmue forces you into tests the player's ability not to become disillusioned by jobs that seem like dead ends. It instead wants you to find some small value in the world it has created, whether it's collecting toys or just taking in the environment. That is up to the player. Shenmue is exceptional in that it desires to create a full world and places the player in the shoes of a person in that world. Not as an exception to the world, Shenmue is not wish fulfillment. It is a slow-motion revenge drama whose final act may never be seen. The thematic beats of the first Shenmue are fairly predictable. Ryo is driven to take revenge on the man who killed his father, despite the protests and advice of literally everyone around him. In pursuing his desire for revenge, he alienates himself from his friends, his family unit. To this day, I am unsure if Ryo's relationship to Ine-san or Fuku-san, and his community. Perhaps because of technical restrictions, but also possibly by design. Ryo is singularly focused on his end goal, finding Lan Di. It makes him stilted, awkward, and impossible to reason with. As consumers of media, we implicitly understand what awaits those who seek revenge. Shenmue knows we understand this, it telegraphs it from the beginning, but it refuses to give us the conclusion. How does a game remind the player to enjoy life in spite of our expectations? Shenmue did it through repetition and world building. Shenmue is a game about finding value in daily minutiae. The revenge story takes a back seat to existing in Suzuki's simulation of 1980s Japan. As Ryo, the player must find ways to pass the time while also being vigilant to not waste away in the comforts of childhood. As with anything one truly values, you cannot let it become your life. You must remain consistent in your drive to be a better person than you were the day before. It is important to be kind and consistent to the ones you love. It is okay to indulge in your interests in order to keep yourself happy. But you cannot coast on these comforts alone. The bad ending in Shenmue where Lan Di returns to kill Ryo occurs if you manage to stay in Yokosuka until April. It's an unmistakably dark ending, but drives home to the theme central to Chapter 1 of Yu Suzuki's unfinished epic. Shenmue's actual ending sees Ryo leaving Yokosuka to board a ship heading to Hong Kong. After saying goodbye to your friends and associates, you fight the Great Chai. Like most of the fights in this game, it's clunky and doesn't work so well. Once you clear it, Ryo sets off to Hong Kong. In 2006, this was extremely satisfying. In 2019, I don't feel as strongly about it. Part of me never wanted to leave Yokosuka. I would have been content to just drive a forklift and play Space Harrier until the end of the world. Yet still, I desired growth, to play Shenmue 2, and I had to accept the circumstances that came with that growth. And part of that was leaving home, leaving my friends, my copy of Space Harrier, and my cozy dojo estate. Obsession may ultimately be Ryo's undoing, his quest for self-improvement and expanding his horizons corrupted by his desire for revenge. The series has suggested that his relationship with the mysterious Shenhua could be his salvation, but until Ryo leaves that cave, we're all in the dark. In the meantime, the player can only infer from what they have experienced in the game. As much as we try to find value in the rigmarole of day-to-day existence, there is still the magnetic pull of destiny dragging us to serve a greater purpose. Only time will tell if Ryo's journey will end with significant loss or if he will find redemption in his quest. However, for nearly 20 years, Shenmue fans have been revisiting this title and finding comfort and joy in the tedious, daily routine of the game's systems. It is wholly unique in its tranquility and depiction of daily life. My friends may never come around to validating Shenmue as a work of art or even a good video game, and that's fine. However, as a fan of the series since early childhood, I can and do make the assertion that Shenmue is one of the single most interesting and entertaining works in the medium, and that we're lucky to be witness to its idiosyncrasies.
Well, that was the article. What did you think about it? I thought it was very, very impressive. It's a very immersive story. The link to the original article is in the description below. Please have a look and give the writer some credit, some kudos. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe and have an awesome day.